Here's 5 reasons why I think the Sony FX3 is the best valued cinema camera you can buy. Today we are looking at the Sony FX3 and 5 reasons why I think it is the best valued cinema camera you can buy right now. Now, I've had this camera for over a year. It has been incredible. I will be doing a full in-depth review talking about every aspect of it. But these are the top reasons why I would consider this the best option to go for right now. Now, when it comes to the term cinema camera, I know this is going to annoy some people because some people say this is not a cinema camera. But I'm really just kind of going on how the word cinema camera is used nowadays. If we're being really strict about what a cinema camera really is, we wouldn't probably be considering these sort of cameras in this price bracket. But as things go, that's the terminology that ends up being searched on YouTube. If I just put what is the best video camera to go for, no one probably would have found this video. Also, from Sony's marketing, this is classed as one of their cine cameras, along with the FX3, the FX6 and FX9, as well of course the Sony Venice. Number 1 is image quality. Overall, I think it is just excellent. The quality that this camera can produce is incredible. And it's just uncompromised with its actual image that you get. It's great in low light, you have huge dynamic range, hardly any rolling shutter as well, all ticking the right boxes to class this as a great cinema camera, especially when you factor in the cost. Sony, with this generation of cameras, really did improve their colour science. Without doubt, in the past, the colour science on Sony cameras was poor. It was hard to edit, it was hard to make it look good without a lot of effort and finesse. But nowadays, you can really get a great image straight out of camera with hardly any effort using S-Log3. Some would argue that Canon, Blackmagic or Red produce better colour science in a similar price bracket, and there's certainly an argument that could go that way, but I don't think it is a deal breaker anymore when it comes to a Sony camera, and the FX3 looks excellent every time I use it. Second up is autofocus, and I know what you're saying right now, a proper cinema camera doesn't need autofocus. Well, I hate to break it to you, but things are changing. Things are moving forward. Don't be a dinosaur. Don't live in the world where you only ever want to shoot manual. You can totally shoot manual with this camera. You just stick a cinema lens on there and you have a full manual camera. But having the option for autofocus is really powerful. More often than not nowadays, you're shooting with small crews. Let's be honest, how many people really out there have the budget for a focus puller all the time and all the shoots they do? Yes, you may have bigger budget shoots or narrative shoots where that makes sense and the budget can be included. But there's so often where you're just doing an interview or something for a corporate client, for example. And really, are you going to have a focus puller for those shoots? Now, of course, you could manually focus yourself. That's not a problem. I've done it for years before getting this camera right here. But why compromise your shooting? Why make it harder for yourself? You should be using technology to enhance what you're doing, to give yourself more time to concentrate on other things. Give yourself more time to concentrate on the composition or the lighting, all these other things you could be thinking about rather than worrying whether the image is actually in focus or not. Third up is size and ergonomics. This camera is so small and it makes it so useful for so many different situations. Now, does a cinema camera need to be this small? Of course not. And often a bigger camera is better because the weight and the inertia is going to give you a better image. However, if you want that, you can always build the camera up. You can always make it bigger and heavier if you wish, but you can never really make a big camera smaller. It's impossible. Well, I think this is such an ideal size. The fact you can pack this down and put it into a small bag and you have a camera that can produce such amazing results with still great battery life, still all the functionality you'd expect from a cinema camera, I think is incredible, and I think it's the way that cinema cameras should head. Yes, of course, you should have options for bigger bodies in their lineup, like you have the FX6, but I think having something that's this powerful on a small body is more useful than not. It makes it much easier to work on a gimbal, for example. It makes traveling via plane much easier as well, as you can pack this down and have a full kit of lenses in your bag rather than the entire bag being taken up by the camera itself. A bit like with autofocus, don't be scared by the size of this camera. It really is liberating rather limiting when it comes to using as a cinema camera. Fourth up is less to do with the camera itself and actually the entire Sony lineup. Sony have really done a good job of building an entire ecosystem and family of cameras that all really complement each other really well. Below the FX3, you have the A7S III, which is pretty much identical. You have the FX30, and of course you have the A7 IV. All these cameras can match really well if you're needing to do a multi-camera setup, or if you're doing interviews with multiple cameras, for example. They match incredibly well, better I think than any other brand out there. Equally, you can go the other way as well. You could have the FX3 as your cheapest camera in your lineup, and perhaps maybe you're using a Sony Venice and you just need something small as a crash camera or something that you can fit inside a car. I think this is where the FX3 is so incredibly versatile. It sits right in the middle of this really great ecosystem that Sony have built. And that's before you even discuss about the wide range of lenses they have on offer as well. Finally, my fifth reason is the fact that there is no compromises when it comes to this camera. And what I mean by that is when it comes to the codec, when it comes to the frame rates, when it comes to the autofocus, it doesn't matter which mode you're shooting, you still have all the various options there. So for example, you can shoot at 100 frames per second and still have full autofocus, just as you would if you were shooting 25 frames per second. Equally, if you want to use a particular codec, you can use it in whichever mode you'd like. This is something I haven't really seen on any other manufacturer. I think Sony, and this particularly the FX3, is the only camera I know which seems to be so uncompromised when it comes to being able to use all the different modes at their maximum ability. Take the C70 for example. Until recently it had limitations on the autofocus when shooting at higher frame rates. Even now it still doesn't have the full DGO sensor when you go above 60 frames per second. So you're always making these compromises to the image or how you shoot when you want to change to different modes. But with the FX3 it stays consistent across the board, and I just find that so useful, especially if you're trying to teach someone else how to use the camera. Even its big brother, the FX6, has more limitations than what FX3 has. It has less codec options, so you can't shoot as compressed, for example. It doesn't have a mini mic jack actually built onto the camera, so as soon as you take the handle off, suddenly you have no way of recording audio. Sony really nailed it when it came to functions and abilities with the FX3, and I just hope we see more of that in their other cameras and also from other manufacturers as well. So there you go, there are my 5 reasons why I think the Sony FX3 is the best value cinema camera you can buy right now. I'd love to know what you think. Do you think the FX3 is still the best cinema camera you can buy at its price range? I'm going to keep putting that caveat in there because of course you can spend a lot more and get a better camera, but I think in terms of value for money, the amount of money you spend and then what you get in return for this camera, I think it's probably the best option out there. I don't think there really is another camera that can beat it in terms of features, abilities, and everything else it can do for its price. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe as it massively helps me out. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.